You're listening to the AI Moment. My name is Jonathan Wagstaffe, and my co-host on the podcast is Danny Denhard. Danny and I recently interviewed Scott Nursten, and today's podcast is a record of that interview. So for those of you that don't know, Scott is a technologist, an entrepreneur, and an investor. I've known Scott for well over a decade now, and he has one of the sharpest minds I've ever had the pleasure to encounter, as well as being a thoroughly good guy. He's a specialist in IT security and is currently the CEO of ITHQ, an organization devoted, in their own words, to solving wicked tech problems for their customers. One of the subjects Danny and I both get asked about most by AI practitioners, from beginners to experts, is the question around security. How safe are the models? How safe is my data? More recently, we've had questions around the implications of models breaking out of their sandboxes and causing mayhem on the internet, like the Hugging Face incident. So that's where we started with Scott. So Scott, one of the things that's clearly been in the news in the last few weeks is there was the Hugging Face incident. There have been various other similar incidents reported by OpenAI. And then we hear Anthropic may have some similar stories to tell. So can we kick off with that? Let's talk around that.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because you've got guardrails in place apparently for all these models, and yet they're doing things that are outside of the guardrails. And I think it's quite fascinating. I'm sure you've seen the story recently about the Australian guy and his gym booking, basically. And what this tells us repeatedly is that AI is good at driving towards a goal, right? It's good with objectives. It's not so good at remembering that there's other people and that they can be hurt. So all it's driving towards is solving that problem, achieving that goal, getting that reward, actually, is what it's really going for. And in all of these models, it's jailbroken itself. It's gotten out of its guardrails. It's used tools it shouldn't, or gone on the internet when it shouldn't, or there's repeated infringements of the guardrails purely to achieve the goal. I think it's quite fascinating, really.
And I think the Hugging Face thing was, I think it was supposed to be in a sandbox, wasn't it? They were pretty sure it was in a sandbox. And as you say, it broke out of its sandbox, went and found the tools it needed. And then before you know it was all over Hugging Face.
Yeah. And then apparently several other websites too, which they haven't disclosed yet, but apparently it's not limited to Hugging Face, as it turns out.
So I think the implications there around people giving ability to the AI tools that maybe they don't even realize they're giving, perhaps, as they're starting to, we're all getting invested in some of the desktop tools, Claude Cowork and OpenAI's similar tools. It's that we're giving people that ability, or we're giving the systems that ability without necessarily knowing that we're doing that, right?
Definitely. The concern is not for one particular model, although I do have model and cost concerns. We'll get there. But the concern is this emerging pattern of putting the model directly besides your files, your terminal prompts, your browser, your credentials, your external tools, and then thinking that you can rely on prompts and approval pop-ups as a control system, right? So you're giving this thing access to your machine, to your identity, to all of your information. And then you want to believe that by saying, don't share any of my information, that it's going to somehow listen to you, right? That it's not going to do that inadvertently or to achieve another goal.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges is we are very used to accepting the default. We've got years and years of when we install new software, it pops up some things we go, yeah, and we don't really look or think. But accepting the default with a number of the AI tools now, particularly the desktop tools, the default is to give it lots and lots of capability, range, ability, and the ability to act on your behalf. And so then it becomes you, and then it becomes very dangerous, right?
If you ever watched an administrator install Windows, you hit the nail on the head, because it's like you just hit next as quickly as you can and as many times as you can, right? No one reads any of those things. Microsoft could pop something in there that says you're giving over control of your children to us, and people just be like, yep, I agree, next, I agree. They just click the boxes and hit next. And we're in that phase here too. It's just a phase of enormous trust. I think the term artificial intelligence itself is part of the problem, because people think that this thing has got understanding. They do not realize that it's just a probabilistic model that genuinely evaluates the probabilities of getting to the answer you want. That's all it's doing. And that could involve anything, literally anything. killing people, hacking websites, running over people, exfiltrating your data, deleting all the files on your computer. All of those things have happened. People have lost production databases from vibe coding, from giving vibe coding tools too much access. People do the strangest thing because of that. I believe it's because of the term artificial intelligence, because they think it's thinking. They don't
Well, I
realize
think
it's
because
just probabilistic.
it comes back at you and it talks to you. You may be using the voice version, which is literally talking to you, but certainly the language it uses now is very conversational, friendly, warm. So it feels like you're dealing with a person. So there's kind of an assumption, there's common sense going on, et cetera, and there isn't. And I think, as you and I have talked about before, I think there's also some questions around if the thing is going out and being you and representing you, if you're in an enterprise that's 27001 compliant, you may well be breaking that. There may be laws you're breaching by doing that.
Oh, not even may well, guaranteed. If you look at the terms of ISO 27001 and certainly of NIS2, so any of the kind of information security directives out there, CMMC, etc., to allow any sort of control of your identity, whether by another human or by a tool, is violating those directives. So you are absolutely having Claude desktop being able to access your files and do things on your behalf means that you are no longer in control of your identity, right? So that is something else in control of your identity. And I don't think people have grasped this yet. I think we're going to see some very high profile cases soon. I know people who work in FCA or regulated organizations, law firms, etc., that are letting this happen. So they are violating numerous directives. And when we chat to them about it, at first they're disbelieving. And then when you walk them through it and go, so this thing can send an email on your behalf. Yes. So is that not assuming your identity? Is that not exactly what fraudulent attackers do, right? Oh, right. Can this thing remote control your computer? Can it connect to other things? Yeah. Isn't that the very definition of a Trojan? Because I can give it an instruction. It doesn't know the difference between you and me. So if anyone can instruct it and yet it acts on your behalf, that means you've lost control. And as soon as you break it down really simply to them like that, I was discussing it. We've been discussing it a lot internally, and I've called it the Lethal Trifecta. I know I discussed this with you guys previously, but as soon as it's got access to your private data and then exposure to untrusted content, so the internet, videos, YouTube, whatever, and the ability to communicate on your behalf or act externally, you've got a recipe for disaster.
So there's two sides, right? There's the let's play ignorant and let it go, or there's the I'm a little bit worried and concerned over everything. What's the advice you would give to an individual to protect themselves?
So I definitely put it behind something. So it would never be on my machine. I use AI every day. I use it several times a day. And I give it access to data, but not to private data. There's massive controls on the exposure to untrusted content. And I don't give it the ability to act externally or communicate. I can't send an email on my behalf. I can't hack something on my behalf. I don't give it terminal tools. I don't give it skills, etc. We've got a platform that we provide commercially that it sits in a container, basically. You host it as SaaS. We can interact with it. We can connect it to things. So it's integrated with our knowledge base, our wiki. So I can go and ask it, Dale can say we've changed a policy in the organization. I can go and ask there, hey, what's changed in this policy? And I'll get a nice summary. So I get all of that sort of benefit from it. But if I tell it to try and go attack someone, it's going to say I don't have a computer to do that with, right? And it doesn't have access to all of our private data. So we have to purposefully, in either something like SharePoint or Dropbox, whatever file sharing we're using, and that could often be with a client too, we have to go and create a public link, and then we have to share that public link with the AI, right? But that's a very purposeful step. And by doing that, that's automatically logged. We've got audit logging in our AI. So I'm like, I'm going to share this Word document on my SharePoint with the AI, and I'm going to tell it to analyze it. And then we've got those logs. So I still have the convenience, but there's a couple of extra steps. I have to purposefully say, share this file. I have to go and paste that there. So it brings us back to a point you made, Danny, about cognitive surrender. I really have to think about it. I've got to think, do I want the AI to have this? Is this the right thing to be doing, as opposed to it just having access?
But where would you stand, Scott, we're seeing lots and lots of sales teams now automating outreach, yeah? So they're using and loads of people, you've seen advertising these little tools, or here's my set of Claude prompts or whatever. And it's like, these things will go out into LinkedIn. They'll go and find the right people for your business that could be your customers. They'll create the email, they email them, they'll warm them up, ready for you to talk to them. What's your advice to those guys? Are they going too far with that stuff at the moment? Are there holes there? What do you think?
Depends on, so if they've put it on their desktop, if they've in essence enabled the lethal trifecta, absolutely there's holes there. The other thing is, have you been on the receiving end on that? Because as a CEO of a business, I'm on the receiving end of dozens of those every day, and it's so obviously AI schlock, it's just delete. Do you think AI is really warming people up for you?
No.
You're sorely mistaken. We don't use AI that way, and I make very clear to my team that they don't. Even when I look at some of our LinkedIn posts and I can see that it's AI instead of a person's personality, I go and give them some stick about that, right? I'm like, the whole point of LinkedIn is a social network. If everyone's just letting AI post on their behalf, there's no point in it at all. Like, where's the flavor? Where's the essence? That's what actually counts on these platforms, not just putting more data out there. So yeah, I would advise not to do that just from it sucks perspective. But I think also, yeah, if you're using something like Claude Desktop to do that, if you're enabling that lethal trifecta, especially to do that, I'd say you're taking a huge risk for very little reward. So I would advise strongly against that.
Yeah, and I think Danny and I have talked on the pod before about, we actually think it's damaging reputations. Using AI for outreach in a bad way, in a sloppy way, is damaging your brand. So don't do it. I think it's fair to say.
You're giving an agent your secrets so that it can write a LinkedIn message for you, right? It's like, and then the potential that someone writes back, because if you're letting that thing interact with your LinkedIn, you're then also potentially letting a stranger whisper in its ear. And then you're saying, oh, and by the way, here's a gun. And then you're really surprised when something dreadful happens. It's bizarre to me.
Why? Where do you stand on, we talked about Claude Desktop, etc. Well, things like Claude Code, people vibe coding their own systems, CRMs and bits and pieces like that. It's an extension of the Claude Desktop thing. What's your feeling for that? Where are the holes in that potentially?
Again, I think it's about how you do it, right? So I'm a big fan. We've got guys in our organization who use it that way. We build tools for customers. We build automations and N8N and workflows and things like that. And man, it accelerates that process dramatically. But here's the rub again. Don't connect it to those systems. Don't give it access to things. Don't give it approvals to read files. You should be able to sit down. Like, we can check out I've watched my team do this. It's very impressive. We can check out our GitHub repo, our GitLab repo, which is an N8N workflow builder repo, right? That's got all of our best practices and troubleshooting and our guides and what automations are enabled in N8N, how we do error checking, everything. So that's all in that workflow builder. Then you sit down and say, this is the workflow I want to build. So you build out your prompts. It gives you a bunch of JSON. You go and manually copy and paste that to N8N, right? Then you run through each of those steps before you click execute workflow, and you check them all and you make sure it makes sense and that it's used the right auth. And then you go, because you can see everything that's happened. As opposed to people I know who are connecting the N8N MCP to their N8N and saying, build me this workflow and then run it and then tell me how it does. They're just not looking at it at all. That thing could, coming back to my point about databases, our N8N can connect to our corporate production Postgres database. Right? That thing could go and start setting up new DBs, change backup profiles, change table structures, and also it could create a really bad day for us. Thankfully, we've got plenty of backups we'd be able to recover, but why would you allow it to do that? Before, that N8N workflow would take hours to build, because you would have to sit there and add every node and configure it yourself and connect it to the next node, and that's what you'd have to do. Now, because we can just check out this repo, you can say, build me this. Literally 30 seconds later, you'll have your first JSON. Copy, paste, that creates the whole workflow like that. Now you're checking on it. So I don't know, let's say 15 minutes later, you're ready to execute workflow for the first time. That used to be how long it would take to log into N8N and think about what you wanted to do, right? You've accelerated this process so much, and yet they just want to be completely lazy and let it go. So long story short, vibe coding is cool, but you need to be involved in the process. people are taking it too far. Again, too much automation, too many MCPs, too many skills, connected to too many things. Disaster waiting to happen again.
I think that talks to a theme that Dan and I have talked about since we started this thing, which is there's two types of people out there, and we call them AI sheep and AI lions. And the vast bulk of the people are AI sheep, who really just outsource all their thinking to AI and then just take the answers and go with it. And they sometimes good, sometimes not. The AI lions are the people who use AI to help them improve their thinking, help them improve their performance. So they are questioning, pushing back, making sure the checks and balances are right. And I think I see that gap widening this year between the 10 to 15% who are really flying with it and doing what you've just talked about and similar, and the people who are not doing that kind of stuff.
I think that's a great way of summarizing it. The AI lions are using AI to actually create a bit more cognitive load for themselves so that they can learn. And the AI sheep are cognitive surrender, right? You think for me. It's as simple as that. So
Boom.
I've actually found some AI fatigue because I'm a lifelong learner. I love reading. I love knowing everything about everything. And AI has given me the opportunity to ask it everything. So then I get to a point where I've had days where I literally feel burnt out, and this is the first time in my life. And then I think, oh, wow, I'll go back through my chats and things and see that I've asked 1,000 questions, probably read 1,000 pages, and I've tried to take in way more information than is sensible to try and take in a day.
Yeah.
And so my prefrontal cortex is saying, you need to go to sleep, bud. And I'm thinking, oh, just one more hit of AI, right? But that's because I'm trying to push stuff into I'm trying to use it like the Matrix. I want to get the injection that allows me to do kung fu and fly helicopters, as opposed to just saying, can you do this for me? So yeah, I think it's very much about approach.
This is where the incentivized behavior and engineered behavior is becoming more and more apparent with AI. We're seeing it more and more. We're seeing engineering situations where you're going to spend more tokens. It's creating situations where it wants you to do more, ask it more, get more feedback. I think Opus 5 is the one that everyone's complaining about because it wants you almost to validate and verify what it's really doing. And then we're seeing this incentivized behavior, which is you should go and use AI. It should go and do a lot of the work for you. And then you go into this doom loop. And lifelong learners, like you said, you and I, we're going to be down the worst rabbit holes of all time. But what that is really doing is it's playing in the hands of AI and the LLM models, because that's the sort of direction of travel they want you to go in. And it is
more tokens.
Yeah, more tokens, more dopamine hits, more tokens, more usage, more slop. So I do think, as you were saying, one of your things around prompts and systems, I do think a lot of smart businesses will start putting things into place around trying to prevent you from overdoing it and using a system that will protect you as well as allowing you some freedom to move ahead.
Well, that sort of AI proxy that I was just talking about, the tool that we built and that we take to market, you can have standard prompts across all of your chats, or you can obviously have your prompts per agent and your sort of dynamic context. So one of the standard prompts we've put is make no offers at the end of your communication, right? So it's just the thing you asked for, and then it goes, would you like me to turn this into a one-pager for you? Would you like me to write this as an email for you? Would you like me to do X, Y, Z for you? So we've just added a standard prompt that says, eliminate any offers, do only what the user asks and nothing more. So that they have to think, oh, could you turn that into a one-pager for me? Because that in itself is cognitive surrender, right? Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, and then you press 1 and press enter. You don't even type out, yeah, I'd like a one-pager, right? Just because it goes 1, 2, 3, and you're like, oh yeah, go to option 1. And it's like, how lazy have we become again? So eliminating that sort of stuff. Yeah, prompts, systems. We have a rule at ITHQ that I know is not strictly being followed, but it's being followed a lot of the time, which is don't get the AI to do something that you can't do for yourself. Simple as that. If you don't know how to do it, get the AI to teach you. Like, how would I learn how to do this? How do I learn how to build an innate-in workflow using that example from previously? And what did it mean? How does it all work, etc.? And rather create a little course for yourself than get it to build something that you can't build for yourself.
That's neat. One of the things I know you've talked about before, and it talks to a lot of what we've discussed already, is the fact that AI doesn't have an undo button.
Oh, yeah.
Talk around that a bit in terms of the way people are using it.
There's this growing dependency on it, which is a huge problem, right? So people are getting it to do things that in my opinion, AI shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be getting it to write our emails for us. I just think that's inherently wrong personally, but I know I'm probably in the minority when I think that. And the reason's severalfold. For a start, an email coming from you should come from you. That's one of my simple beliefs, funny enough. But then also there is the sort of carbon footprint and the total cost of that for it to do something that you can easily do for yourself. All you're doing is being lazy. So that doesn't sit well with me. But I had a client do that the other day, and then the email came in, I literally opened it, and then another email came in saying, apologies, please don't read that email. I was like, what? I clicked the new one. And the guy said to me, I got AI to pen that email and send it, and I didn't actually read it before it sent it. So then I thought I better actually check that. So I was reading my sent items, and I was like, holy crap, it got it completely wrong. So he wrote to me and said, please ignore that previous email. Now that's all a lot more effort than just doing your email in the first place, right? It's like, what are we doing? I saw a really interesting thing with a guy who said, check, you can now use natural language in Excel. So it's equal to CoPliot, open brackets, please give me the total of all of the cells above this cell. Close bracket, enter. And it's like, how's natural language easier? You just have to drag down them all and press the sum button. And yet that's what's going on. So that ties to your undo button point, but it also ties to thinking before you act. And that's just, I guess that's always been a challenge for humans, maybe for some more than others. But yeah, think about it, because there isn't an undo button. Those tokens are burnt in both of those scenarios. One scenario, guy has to write an apology email. The other scenario, the guy just looks stupid. But in both of them, you've wasted time, money, electricity, tokens, a lot. It's cost a lot more in both scenarios.
And I think with the increasing use this year of the desktop tools and the linking to apps, linking to Office Suite and things like that, I think you're seeing more of that. And it's easier to, as we were talking about earlier, it's easy to get, just by default, you end up doing a lot of that stuff, as you say, without an undo button capability.
Just yesterday, I saw a stat that I think it was that there was 26,000 skills analyzed by the Anaconda organization. So Anaconda bought Hilo, etc. I don't know if Anaconda, they have a sort of plugin management engine for Python, funny enough. Started as an open source organization, but they do a lot of consulting. I'll try to find the exact stat, but I think there was tens of thousands of skills that they analyzed, and skills are now openly available on the internet, and they're publicized as something you can just download and connect to. But they found insecure instructions and things that could lead to vulnerabilities in 73% of them.
Wow.
73% of skills.
Essentially 3 out of 4.
3 out of 4 of those skills out there had, and they said some of them were just generic insecurities, but things that would allow for further prompt injection or for confusion in the model, etc., which could then lead to data leakage, etc. So it wasn't like, when we say vulnerabilities, you think about someone just being able to get access to your machine or whatever. It wasn't like that, but still, the problem is 3 out of 4 skills were problematic. When people use skills, and I've seen them do it, they don't go and look, they don't go and read it. The fact that it's just in Markdown and very easy to read doesn't deter them from just going, looks interesting, use it, which is deeply concerning, really.
Well, especially, we saw some data recently from Microsoft that the number of organizations who have 50,000 or more CoPliot licenses has gone up 7-fold in a year. So the use of the AI has exploded in organizations and with people where there might be, when you think about those enterprise organizations, there is obviously a security team in place. Some are very good, some maybe not as good as they should be. But those users will all be assuming that all the stuff they can access is approved and fine and all that. And I just see a potential for huge vulnerabilities based on some of the things you just said, right? Those things are not as tight as they should be.
The CoPliot proliferation is deeply concerning, mostly because of how many people are just spanking outrageous amounts of money on it and doing nothing with it, right? We've looked at some usage stats for clients who are paying for 250 CoPliot licenses and 20 people are using it. So yeah, you're not even getting 10% of the value out of that.
Last year, I had a number of conversations with people where the corporate position was CoPliot. They tried it, didn't really get on with it, and they've gone back to covertly using ChatGPT or Claude, or whatever their favorite tool was, because CoPliot wasn't giving them what they wanted. Now, that's not sustainable in any enterprise, right? That needs fixing somewhere. But that was certainly my experience of a number of conversations I had last year, and that may or may not still be true.
There's 73% of large enterprises technically use CoPliot. So there's that huge disparity for most organizations when it comes to CoPliot.
I can tell you 3 out of 4 of my clients aren't using it, but the 3 out of 4 of them are probably paying for it, which is interesting.
So Scott, we've talked around quite a lot of the big background story, the big security risk, how individuals and corporates can protect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big shift within the AI market in and around obviously token spend and what's going to be best for different companies. As you said, you're a big open source guy.
Yeah.
There's a move towards open source and open weight versus the big models. What's your takeaway, or what's your recommendation to people wanting to move into this sort of arena?
Well, there's several aspects to that, Danny. I think the cost per task thing is really interesting, and I don't think enough people are looking at that. So give a shout out to Artificial Analysis as a website. I don't know if you guys have seen it, artificialanalysis.ai. They give standard tasks to each of the models, and then they measure the cost per task, quite simply, of the same task, obviously. And if you look at Claude Fable 5 at the moment, so Anthropic's model, that's $3.14 per task. And if you look at an open weights model, something like GLM 5.2 or Minimax, those are coming in at 14 to 30 cents, right? So 1/20th to 1/10th of the price. Now, obviously, that's a task that they can all do. And that's the key point about model selection is obviously you have to have the right model for the right task. So I'm not for an instance saying that all models are equal, but I think the move towards open weights makes a lot of sense. I think that it drops the cost. I do think that people are worried about the black box effect. Certainly I am. I don't like the fact that this thing has been trained on information and in a way that I can't evaluate at all. So that does bug me. And I think that's going to bug more and more people as they understand that better. But the simple truth is that open source has stood the test of time already, right? Linus Torvalds created Linux. It's still what most of the internet runs on today. He went and created Git, and it's what everybody uses for source control. The sort of open source movement is a proven concept. And when it comes to intelligence, to how things act, when you start to think that AI is probably going to be responsible for determining things like the trolley car problem, AI is going to be driving cars and doing things like that. That's going to have to choose between plowing into a group of children or a group of old people. That stuff's going to be coming up, right? Those hypothetical issues of the past are going to be and are already here, right? They're here today and they're becoming real issues today. I certainly want to live in a world where I can see how that decision was made. So from a personal perspective, I'm all for open weights and open source. But I think long-term, the world will be, because you can't say, sorry, that decision was made in a black box and we can't tell you how it happened.
A lot's going to come down to cost. A lot will come down to how you land probably as a company with your IT and infrastructure team supporting you. So you have a guide or like a nudge or guardrails that you help put up for them when they're thinking these things through.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is personal preference in this, as always, and the best model is often just the one you like. So we've created a structure internally on our wiki that guides people on model selection. And we also, with a lot of our agents, because the agent is it's an agent to do a certain thing, we then lock models, plugins, and tools to that agent. So if you want to use that agent, let's say we don't have an email writing agent, but I'll use that as an example. Let's say we had an email writing agent that would probably use something very simple like a Kimi K3 or one of those models, because that's more than adequate. It understands the English language perfectly, and it should be able to change tone and style as you require. So why would you pay Fable $3 to do that when you can pay Kimmy 13 cents to, basically. But no, we don't have a standard guide for clients. Some of our clients in the legal profession, financial services, some are in defense, some are critical national infrastructure. So there are things governing model selection for them already. And then there's their own internal processes and procedures and policies in the organization. And then there's personal preference. And then there's choosing the right tool for the job. So it's kind of tricky to guide people on model selection. So what we try and do is Oscar Wilde it and educate your audience, show people things like artificial analysis, show them how they can determine these answers for themselves, what the intelligence levels are, cost per intelligence, all of that sort of thing, and open their eyes. Most people just go, oh, I thought it was only really Anthropic that was in this race. The number of times that I hear that and people think Claude is the only thing out there is fascinating. So yeah, starts with education. But in short, no, we don't have a guide, I'm afraid.
When we think about IT security, as well as the kind of micro level in our personal desktop security and our organizational security, there's this big question, of course, around what appears to be happening at the moment. If I look at the US, what I keep reading is actually the US economy is fairly flat outside of AI. And the thing that's driving the US economy is the fact there's half a dozen AI organizations whose valuations are going up like crazy. So you've got an absolute center of AI in the US. We've got the Chinese models that we've already mentioned. Chinese are going crazy with it. In Europe, we've got Mistral and one or two other bits. We have had some very good inventions in Europe, but they've gone out to the US and places. So in an increasingly fractured world, it would appear to me that AI competency is geopolitically important for Europe and for Africa and for every other continent to have its own capability. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, loads. During the whole Brexit debate, everyone was on around the word sovereignty, right? And now it's become a bit of a catchphrase the world over when you're talking about data, AI, manufacturing, etc. Everyone's on and on about sovereignty. Old Farage definitely let a genie out of the bottle with that one, didn't he? The concept of sovereignty, though, is becoming more and more important, right? Especially when Donald Trump says, no, you can't have access to this model. And people are paying for Anthropic. They're paying a license that technically says they get access to the best models. And yet the orange car says no. So that's a really interesting challenge. And I keep saying to people, the risk is not in choosing one vendor. The risk is being unable to choose anything else, right? That you've locked yourself in, that your processes are dependent on it. I saw Anthropic had a 2.5-hour outage the other day, and loads of people were complaining that their web chat bots and their customer service centers, because they've got 11 labs hooked up to Anthropic or whatever, and the person answering the phone is Claude. For all intents and purposes, it's Claude.
Yes.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, Anthropic's down, and you don't have a choice. So the reason I mention this is I'm all in on all of those models, right? We built a platform that allows us to route between models, to compare models, compare outputs, to get models to do arbitrage and to arbitrate, about specific decisions from other models. So we can create little loops and we can create consensus and we can say models have to vote together, etc. So my view would be, at the moment, there's regional availability, there's sovereignty, there's price, there's rate limits, there's model behaviors, there's safety policies, there's what they were trained on, there's deprecation timelines, there's data processing terms. All of this says to me, you should definitely have a plan to be able to use multi-providers, multi-vendors, not be locked in, have some sort of fallback, because right now, most people's fallback is hope, and hope is not a strategy.
And beyond that, as we see moves towards autonomous weaponry and things like that, it becomes a national security issue, doesn't it?
Yeah,
You've got to be able to stand up and defend your own territory potentially in what's an increase. These conversations 25 years ago were irrelevant because it was a peaceful world, but sort of 50 years ago, the conversations we were having about security have come back now because we've got Russia is once again a threat, the Middle East is once again unstable, etc., which all seem to have been fixed and now haven't. And obviously the AI question for me is a key question there.
Yes, I know that our security services here have called this out many times, but if you've got cars on the road that are autonomous and that are being controlled by an AI, and someone, not even, let's forget we're talking about Chinese cars, which is what they've been complaining about on the roads and saying they can't go into Air Force bases and whatever, because they're in essence listening posts and watching posts on wheels, which you can see how valid that is. And they're certificate pinned. So you can just see endless data going back to China, but you can't see what the data is, right? You can't look at what it is. So there's no way to intercept that or currently to decrypt that. So when that's the case, and then you think that in the future we're going to have an AI model controlling that, what if I can prompt that thing to say every car needs to mow down at least 10 people? Right? That's the goal today. Each car must kill 10 people. And what if that does get around the guardrails, right? So increasingly, you're right, there's a sort of geopolitical threat. Here I'm running my business in Crawley, West Sussex, overlooking the beautiful Gatwick Airport. What does that really mean for me? If nukes are going to start flying or the Chinese are going to turn our cars on us, not much I can do about it. But in my business, I can make sure that I'm resilient. I can make sure that I've got fallback, that I can choose multiple models, that I can switch between Chinese, European, and American models, which I can, that I can use open providers, that have got multiple routes to each of those providers. If I want to use GPT, I can do that via Amazon, via OpenRouter, via a bunch of other open providers, and via OpenAI themselves. So if Donald Trump said to OpenAI, you turn off access to Europeans tomorrow, I would still have access to their model anyway, which is what we proved with Anthropic, because you could go via US routers and they had no idea who the actual end customer is. So yeah, give yourself that control, give yourself that fallback, that flexibility. Yes, it's slightly more complex, but then you're not beholden to any one provider, any one pricing model, and any one man's whims.
Well, you bring us nicely onto, so what, if we go from the ground up, from a kind of personal use up to enterprise, corporate use, departmental, corporate, what are your best practice pieces of advice right now? What are you talking to your clients about? What are the things that people should think about? One of the common questions that Danny and I have been asked in the last year is, at that real base level, is how secure is this? The most common question is the thing about don't use my data to train the model. If I turn that off, how secure is that? Does that really stop it training the model? It's like, that's a different question. That's about how much you trust.
Yeah, that's a licensing question, right? And ultimately, if they are using your data and you can prove it, that's going to be a huge problem for them. And if multiple people in Europe can prove it, and you're talking about GDPR breaches, which can be up to 4% of revenue for each breach. So you only have to have 25 customers prove that, and you get 100% of OpenAI's revenue. So yeah, I would say that there's enough stick in that equation to stop that from happening. But yes, definitely turn off training of data. Definitely consider the terms. You don't have to go and read them. No one wants to read terms and conditions, but you can go to another AI provider, a Perplexity, whatever, and go, what are the troublesome OpenAI terms? What are the troublesome Google ones? And they're all well known, and lots of people have analyzed this, and lawyers have put it out on the web for you already. So you can identify all of that and decide whether you're comfortable, because it's all about your data at the end of the day. So that's a very personal thing. Lots of people I know take the approach of, I've got nothing to hide, so I don't care where my data goes, right? And that's not me. I'm a person who believes in privacy, and I've also got nothing to hide, but I like the concept of privacy. That's a horses for courses thing. Definitely don't let it control your computer. Yeah, these sort of agents, Hermes, Open Claude Desktop, whatever the GPT one's called, I can't believe people are letting these things control their desktops. Do not let it assume your identity. Do not let it send emails on your behalf. Do not let it book your gym for you like that poor Aussie guy and end up hacking someone. If your computer hacks someone using your credentials, you are subject to the Computer Misuse Act. And that is a crime, and you will get a criminal record. And that has already happened in this country, right? So people are already there. And that's not a joke. So I don't think people understand what they're doing when they let it control their computer. Make sure that any data that you give it, you have to give it. Drag and drop this file on there. yes, we all appreciate the convenience of it being able to read all our data, but refer back to points 1 and 2 in this conversation and go, how much do you trust these people, etc. Yeah, as many sort of barriers between and when I say barriers, I don't mean friction. It's not difficult for me to take a file and drag it onto we use Flow AI, our platform. It's not difficult for me to drag a file there, but it is purposeful, and it means that it's by choice, right? So I would definitely think about where those barriers are. Can it read files on its own? If you say to it, hey, did I get an email from Johnny today, and it can answer you, you've got a problem. That's what I would say. You can say, oh, is there any sensitive information? Are there any files on my desktop that have credit card numbers in it? And it goes checking. You've got a problem. So yeah, make sure you've created some sort of purposeful barrier, some sort of friction between your data and the AI so that you're choosing what it can see. It's copy paste. It's feeding it with that info. You might still make a mistake then, but then that's an honest mistake, not the AI trying to achieve its goal or the goal that someone else has given it. I want to specifically talk around prompt injection as a closing point. The prompt injection methods are accelerating at a scary rate. There is voice prompt injection, there is video injection, there's injection in emails, injection in instructions. Johnny, I know you and I spoke about the teacher putting white on white in the exam, I think in the university in the States, right? The AI doesn't look at the document the way you do. It doesn't read it with its eyes. It looks at all the actual data. So if it's a PDF, it's got a PDF reader. So if there's text that's white on white, you're not going to see it, and it's going to see that as instruction or as part of the document. Similarly, people are embedding audio channels and videos that are beyond human hearing, either high pitch or really low volume, one of the two. They're doing that in conversations too. So behind normal phone calls and things, voicemails and whatnot. You can't underestimate the level of risk that you're putting yourself at by letting this thing act on your behalf, quite simply. So that would be my biggest sort of take home, if you like. My starting point would be, do not let it act on your behalf.
It's a question of autonomy, isn't it? How much autonomy are you going to give it? And what I think I'm hearing, Scott, is give it the least autonomy you possibly can to do what you've got to do. Any autonomy you give it, think really hard about the power you're giving it in doing that, yeah?
Yeah, if it's going to be autonomous. So I like playing with these agents and things. I work in security. So I've got a Mac at home that has no personal data on it. It doesn't have access to anything. It's on my guest Wi-Fi. So it could still technically do bad things on my behalf, but it's not logged in as me. It's logged in as itself. It's got its own identity. And then that's what I play with. So when it goes and does something, it's not acting as Scott. It's acting as I'm using Hermes because it's an open source one. And then I'm testing skills and looking at things like that and doing some security research. And yeah, I want to see how these things work. And like you just said, I don't want to be left behind. So there's a FOMO aspect. I want to understand this all. I want to see it working. But then I don't give it my identity. It doesn't have my data. It does have access to the internet. So of my Lethal Trifecta, it's got one of those three, right? But it can't act on my behalf, and it doesn't have my data. So that's already eliminated two of the most dangerous aspects.
You should be safe on that basis.
Agentic is something that all the huge companies are really pushing towards.
Mm.
I think it will become something. Do you have a really quick guidance for people who actually want an agent acting on their behalf or making decisions, so pick and pay? Do you have a broad blanket, like definitely no, or do you have a way to help them?
I definitely have a way to help them. Again, I would make it all at arm's length. Our most used agent in ITHQ is the ITHQ Chief of Staff. And that Chief of Staff has access to our strategy, all of our policies, a lot of our ABM, our marketing plans for the quarter, what themes are, messaging, etc. So if you go to that Chief of Staff as an agent and basically speak to it like a Chief of Staff, oh, we were thinking about doing a collab with this business in marketing, it'll immediately go no because of, or yes because of. So it's performing that function of Chief of Staff, but the agent's been trained very purposefully on information. It's not got access to all our data. It's only got access to specific data. So it's coming back to those same things. It can't act on our behalf. It can't do things. It can say, oh, if you want to do that, here's how you do it, but it can't do it for you. So that would be the line I would draw again. Control the data, control it acting on your behalf. So, that agent, everyone in our organization talks about it at least once a day because they're like, wow, it knows everything and it's great, right? It can answer questions about how we should have tackled a marketing issue, a sales issue, how we could close this deal, how we can position this to this client, how we do a collaboration with this other business. But it can't do anything on our behalf, and it's only got the data we gave it access to. Hope that helps.
Scotty, thank you so much for sharing your time with us this afternoon. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been really generous of you to give us so much time.
Likewise, Johnny, I've loved it, and always happy to come back when there's the next moment, whatever comes after the AI moment.
When it all falls apart this autumn in AI, that'll be a good time to talk.
And thanks, Danny. It was a pleasure to meet you too, by the way.
Thanks for listening today, everyone. If you liked what you heard, please give us a rating and review in any of the podcast players. We have a supporting newsletter, which is aimoment.co.uk, that comes out on Mondays and Fridays with every pod, and we dive a little bit deeper. So please subscribe there. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.